So it sounds like you almost have to break down walls that has been put up over the many years. And it's a fundamental shift of how do you then see procurement, whether it's from a governance gatekeeper or to a more empowered kind of function. And I still remember that the word empower itself is almost like a taboo-like kind of word at that moment. The management could have shut you down at any time.
You talk about building walls. I think there were walls. We broke them down, and new walls appeared to show the management committee and the board that the governance structure they had in place was driving non-governance. And that sounds a bit like Catch-22, but it was. Now, that's a dangerous game to play because I'm going to the board and saying the things that you've signed off, the thing that you live by is actually driving more non-compliance than less. I had to demonstrate to them that the singular approach they took, the predetermined outcomes that they wanted to see were driving dysfunctional behaviour. And I'll give you an example where at a corporate level, 90% of the spend that was going through procurement ultimately was through a bid waiver process because the processes they set up weren't fit for purpose. So there was no segmentation, there was no assessment of risk or value. And as you well know, once you start to look at that from a portfolio perspective, you have to apply different levers. That's a standard procurement approach. Showing them there's more risk here by doing what you do, and therefore more potential lack of governance. That's how we started to open the door. And we were doing it on their terms. They didn't want to hear about value. They didn't want to hear about what was happening in an MNC. They didn't want to hear about best practice. They wanted to understand how could we assure governance, but also provide a service and a product that was much more user-friendly by reducing the layers. So that's where we started. And that was a bit of a light bulb moment, I think, for them. And that gave us the platform to then introduce, so what about supply chain risk? What about sustainability? What about value? What about whether it's cost savings or value beyond cost? What about all these things that you do not even, they don't even register with you today? There's massive risks here, which you don't see.
Yep.
The recalibration of governance was settled down and they were comfortable that the new ways of working were actually going to allow them to sleep easy at night.
Yep. So basically, it's, if I would put it in a nutshell, is bringing back procurement to supporting the business outcome. You talk about sustainability, you talk about resilience, you talk about even to the point of value.
As we were going through this so the tree kind of governance that we had to swim through, we got past that and then it was like, okay, we want to introduce new processes, value-adding processes. Our category management was sort of there. And so here was our chance to say, okay, let's now bring in a new process and prove principle. They chose oil, so not surprisingly, we buy a huge amount of oil. From a traditional procurement perspective, we couldn't drive a cost benefit in oil management. They knew that. I didn't know that, but they knew that before we even started. So it sort of set us up a bit, but actually we managed to turn it around to our advantage. We looked at the end-to-end situation with oil. To your point about outcomes, for me, procurement's always about outcome. And the outcome here was keeping ships on the water.
Yeah.
So when you look at a key business metric in MISC, ship utilization percentage is gold. Oil is obviously one enabler of that. You go into a port, you take on oil, you go out. That supply chain and the ability to rotate that supply chain quickly and efficiently is all about revenue. So actually the ultimate customer is the charterer of the vessel who wants to keep ship on the water. Our focus was not on the input of oil. We were proliferating suppliers, not reducing suppliers. It was almost counterintuitive. We had to then go and look at the end outcome. If that meant that we actually had to increase what we pay for our oil, because that actually enables a faster turnaround and better utilization, that's what we do. So that story helped to sort of transform the perception of what procurement can do, because the business was now looking at what are these key business outcomes that procurement can now support us with, without us knowing, took us to a different level.
Yep.
Which I didn't think we'd get to until we'd gone through maybe further rites of passage.